It was supposed to be the last night of my life. I stood on the rooftop of a nameless building. The city sprawled out beneath me like a breathing, glittering beast. Neon signs blinked lazily in the distance. The buzz of nightlife below hummed through the air, but up here it was silent, isolated. Just the wind and me. No calls, no texts. No one asked where I was or if I was okay. It was a kind of loneliness that crept beneath the skin, numbing everything until even pain stopped making sense. I hadn't planned some dramatic note or farewell. I just wanted it to be over. The exhaustion in my bones, the emptiness in my chest, none of it felt like it would ever leave. I was ready, or I thought I was. Then she appeared, like some kind of ghost, or maybe an angel. "Don't," she said simply. Her voice wasn't urgent or panicked. It was calm, like she'd been expecting to find someone up here, like she knew me. I turned, half annoyed, half intrigued. She looked barely older than me, barefoot on the cold concrete, her long dark hair whipped by the wind. A soft, oversized sweater hung off one shoulder. She looked ordinary, but something in her eyes burned with a strange intensity. "Who are you?" I asked. "Someone who knows what it feels like," she replied, "to be right there." I laughed, bitter and hollow. "Right. And what is it that you think you know?" She took a step closer. "People who really want to die don't come up here just to stare. They come up looking for a reason not to. You don't want to jump. You want someone to stop you." That hit harder than I expected. I should have told her to leave. I should have jumped. But I didn't. She sat beside me without asking. Her presence was unsettling, not because she said anything profound, but because she didn't say anything at all. She didn't ask why I was there or what had happened. She just sat, quiet, solid. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Eventually, I broke the silence. "What's your name?" "Elara." Unusual. It stuck in my mind like a note from a forgotten song. "And why are you here, Elara?" She glanced sideways at me. "Because you needed someone to be." It sounded arrogant, but the strange thing was, I believed her. I don't remember getting up. I don't remember deciding to walk away from the ledge. But when the sun started to rise, I was still alive, standing beside her, the wind warming slightly with the coming morning. She didn't ask me to follow her. She just started walking, and I went. Maybe I was desperate. Maybe I was curious. Or maybe I was already so far gone that I didn't care what happened next. We walked for what felt like hours, through streets I didn't recognize, past closed storefronts and flickering lampposts. Eventually, we reached a small car parked near an alley. It wasn't new, but it was clean. She drove in silence. The radio turned low, playing something soft, piano, maybe. I stared at her hands on the steering wheel. Pale fingers, chipped nail polish. Not the hands of a savior. But something about the way she gripped the wheel made me think she had driven away from many things. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Someplace quiet," she said. "You look like you need silence more than sleep." She was right. The city fell behind us, replaced by winding roads and dense woods. Trees leaned over the path like guardians of a secret. The further we drove, the more the fog seemed to thicken. Eventually, we pulled up to a small house nestled between trees, weathered, wooden, and half swallowed by ivy. It looked like no one had lived there in years. But when she unlocked the door and flicked on the lights, it felt alive. "You can stay," she said, "as long as you want. No questions, no demands, just those words." I didn't respond. I just stood in the doorway, taking in the mismatched furniture, the dusty bookshelves, the smell of cinnamon and dried leaves. There was a cat curled on a chair in the corner. It didn't stir. She handed me a blanket and pointed toward a couch. "You can take the bed, if you prefer." "No, here is fine." She nodded, as if that settled everything. I lay there for hours, staring at the ceiling. I didn't cry. I didn't sleep. I just existed. But for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was disappearing. When I finally closed my eyes, I dreamed of stars falling into the sea. And when I woke, Elara was sitting by the window, watching the forest, as if she'd never left her seat. I should have felt like a prisoner. But I didn't. I found, it started with the smallest shift, a delay in her return text, a sudden change in tone, a laugh that didn't sound like it used to. Nothing big, just a flicker. But flickers have a way of becoming fires. She told me she had a business trip, 3 days in Berlin, a conference about sustainable design, hosted by a firm she'd always admired. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? After 4 years together, trust had become second nature. But even as I helped her pack, something in her eyes didn't match her smile. "I'll call you every night," she said, zipping up her bag. "You'd better." I joked, pulling her into a hug. But the moment she turned away, I caught a look on her face, something fleeting, almost like guilt. The first night, she did call. She sounded tired but excited, told me about the speakers, the hotel, the wine they served during the networking event. I listened, smiled, played my part, but there was a hollowness to it, a rehearsed rhythm in her voice. The second night, she didn't call until almost 2 a.m. "Sorry," she mumbled. We all went out, lost track of time. Her voice was off, too alert, like she was trying not to sound drunk. I lay awake after that, phone pressing my chest, and for the first time in 4 years, I didn't feel like I knew her. By the third day, something snapped. Maybe it was intuition, maybe it was something deeper. I opened her laptop. She never locked it. She had nothing to hide, or so I thought. There was a recent search, train schedules to Leipzig, not Berlin, and a saved location in her map history, a street I recognized all too well, my best friend's address. I froze. My breath hitched. It had to be a mistake. Maybe she was planning a surprise, a visit, a gift, but my gut told me the truth before my mind accepted it. I called her. She didn't pick up. I waited 10 minutes, tried again. This time she answered, sounding out of breath. "Hey, what's up?" "Where are you?" "Still in Berlin. Just stepped out of a seminar." "You sure?" She paused. Just a second, but it was long enough. "Yeah, why?" "No reason." I ended the call. I didn't want to hear another lie. I got in the car. I drove straight to my friend's building, parked down the street, and waited. An hour passed, then 2, and then I saw her, not in business attire, no conference badge, just jeans, a hoodie that wasn't hers, and sunglasses even though the sun was already setting. She stepped out of the building like she belonged there, like she'd done it before, and then he followed. My best friend. They didn't touch. They didn't need to. The silence between them was loud enough. I sank lower into the seat. My hands were trembling, my throat dry. It was like watching someone I loved die and not being able to scream. She walked to her car and drove off. He lingered on the steps, looking out toward the road like he sensed something. I ducked. I couldn't face him. Not yet. I didn't go home that night. I drove for hours. Ended up at a gas station 50 miles away, just sitting in my car, staring at nothing. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just unraveled. The lie wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was how easy it was for her to tell it, how natural she sounded, as if the truth was never a home she lived in, just a costume she wore. And so the first crack appeared, a hairline fracture in the perfect life we'd built. I didn't know it then, but that crack was the beginning of the end, and I couldn't stop it, not anymore. The days after our confrontation blurred together like smoke in a broken mirror. I had exposed her lies, or so I thought, but even as the truth slipped into view, it still felt like I was chasing shadows. Her words were carefully chosen to mislead, to wound, to make me question not only who she was, but who I had become with her. Sleep became a stranger. Food lost all taste. Every moment was filled with spirals of doubt and flashes of memory I couldn't trust anymore. And then one word changed everything. Elias. She didn't mean to say it. It slipped out mid-argument, her voice cracking with something that sounded like panic. Elias wouldn't let this happen. Just like that. A single sentence wrapped in fear and authority. The moment she realized what she had said, her face went ghost pale. She tried to bury it under another lie, but it was too late. I'd heard it, and I couldn't unhear it. I needed to know who Elias was. I started with her laptop. She had tried to cover her tracks, deleting files, wiping chats, clearing history. But most people don't know how deep their digital footprints run, buried in obscure backups and mislabeled folders. Her past was still there, just hidden beneath the surface. Obsession teaches you to adapt. It sharpens you. Within days, I was parsing through encrypted logs, mapping email trails, and restoring fragmented conversations she thought were gone forever. Then I found him. An alias at first, L_Covenant, tied to encrypted financial transfers, anonymized accounts, digital ghosts. But one mistake gave him form: a dinner reservation in Vienna, not paid in crypto, but a credit card. And on the receipt, Elias M. Grigori, a real name. I traced the address linked to the transaction: an apartment in Vienna's 7th district. Classy, expensive, the kind of place that doesn't just say wealth. It says legacy. No one answered the door, but I didn't leave empty-handed. I slipped a note under a false name into the mailbox. Polite, vague, but just suspicious enough to catch attention. While waiting, I dug into her past. The more I searched, the clearer it became I never knew her. The girl I loved? A fabrication. The stories? Holes everywhere. A boarding school in Zurich that had no record of her. An internship in Paris with no digital footprint. Friends she'd mentioned in passing. None of them seemed to exist. And then I found Clara, a name from an old photo in Prague, a possible roommate. I called, unsure if the number still worked. She answered, wary at first. Clara listened as I explained what I discovered. But it wasn't until I mentioned Elias that everything changed. Silence. Then a whisper. You have no idea what you've stepped into. She told me about nights when Nora, or whatever her real name was, slipped out of the apartment wearing wigs, carrying new IDs. She had suitcases with passports, burner phones, medical documents in different names. She said it was her job, Clara said, but it felt like a cult, a performance night after night. Handler, that was the word Clara used to describe Elias. My blood turned to ice. I flew home with my thoughts on fire. The betrayal ran deeper than infidelity. I was dealing with an operation, a system, a lie built not from emotion, but from architecture. This wasn't about love. It was about control. I printed everything: IP logs, receipts, conversations, screenshots. I arranged it like a case file. Every name, every location, every coded reference was mapped. She had secrets, but now so did I. That's when I got the first warning. An anonymous message. No name, no greeting. Just one sentence. Elias doesn't like loose ends. It felt like someone had reached through the screen and grabbed my throat. But I didn't pull back. I leaned in. I contacted Matteo, an old friend and cybersecurity analyst. We hadn't spoken in years, but when I showed him the data, my case file, he fell silent. Then, this isn't random. It's structured, hierarchical. These people profile, infiltrate, and manipulate their targets. This is psychological warfare. Matteo started helping me trace the most frequent alias that appeared alongside Elias, Nora L. She wasn't just living a double life. She had dozens. Nora Lenz, Nora Vassilieva, Nora De Laurentiis. Each name tied to a different story, a different victim. Men like me, some wealthier, some lonelier, but all of us marked. One night, a package arrived. No return address. Inside, a flash drive. It contained a video. Grainy, dimly lit, but unmistakable. She was sitting next to Elias. Not intimately, not romantically. This was clinical. Business. She handed him photographs. Of me, typed notes, observation logs. Elias nodded like a man pleased with results. I was never her partner. I was her project. The pain was instant, but the fear didn't last long. It was replaced by something colder, stronger. I was no longer a victim. I was a witness. I booked a flight to Geneva, one of the last digital pings linked to Elias's name. I didn't care what it cost. I didn't care what came next. The moment I heard the name this wasn't about heartbreak anymore. Everything unraveled. It was about breaking the system under her breath during one of our worst arguments. A moment of panic when her mask slipped. Elias wouldn't let this happen, she had muttered, and the second the name left her lips, she froze. Her eyes darted, her mouth opened to speak, but she said nothing. The silence afterward was louder than any scream. Elias. That name echoed in my mind like a curse. I didn't ask her about it right away. I didn't confront her. Instead, I waited. I watched. I pretended to go about my day while quietly unraveling the seams of the life I thought we shared. I started with her phone. I had memorized her passcode long ago, not out of mistrust, but out of intimacy. Now, it served a different purpose. Most of the messages were gone. Conversations deleted, but the cloud remembered what she wanted to forget. A backup from 3 months ago revealed strange threads, messages written in code, symbols I didn't understand. She wasn't just hiding something. She was part of something. I dug deeper. Her emails led me to private folders, hidden behind aliases and encryption. But obsession sharpens the mind. I stayed up for days, teaching myself how to crack through layers of security. And when I did, I found a spreadsheet, names, locations, brief profiles. A list, people like me, targets. She had detailed notes beside each one. Interests, vulnerabilities, psychological markers. My stomach turned when I found my own name. Next to it, stage for emotionally dependent minor suspicion. I felt the blood leave my face. That night, I confronted her. I didn't show my anger. I showed her the file. She looked at it, then at me, and then, for the first time, she told the truth. Or at least, something that sounded like it. It wasn't supposed to go this far, she said. I asked her who Elias was. She paused. He's the one who found me, gave me purpose. A cult? I asked. No, she whispered. A system. I wanted to scream. Instead, I listened. She talked about a network. A hidden one. Elias was at the center. A handler, a recruiter, a manipulator. She was chosen for her looks, her charm, her ability to adapt. They trained her, paid her, gave her a new life in exchange for loyalty. She infiltrated lives, extracted information, broke people down. It wasn't personal. It was work. But we were real, she said. Weren't we? I didn't answer, because I didn't know. I asked her if she ever loved me. She didn't reply. I left. I didn't take anything with me. Not clothes, not memories. Just a flash drive with everything I'd found. My only anchor to reality. The next morning, she was gone. Vanished. No trace. I tried to call. No answer. Her number disconnected. Her accounts deactivated. The apartment she said was hers had never been in her name. She'd disappeared before. But this time, I wasn't just a lover left behind. I was a witness. And I knew they'd come for me next. The days after our confrontation passed like a fever dream. I had caught her lies mid-flight, watched them crumble, but somehow the truth still felt just out of reach. She had said just enough to confuse, to distract, to make me question not only her, but myself. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. But more than anything, I couldn't stop thinking. There was a name she had slipped during our last argument. Elias. It wasn't intentional. It was a slip, a half-breathe. Elias wouldn't let this happen. As if he was some kind of authority, a person she trusted even more than herself. She turned pale the moment the name left her lips and tried to cover it up with another lie. But I had already heard it. Elias. I needed to know who he was. I started with her laptop. She thought she had deleted everything, but she wasn't careful. Most people aren't. There were old backups stored deep in her system. Hidden folders, browser histories, encrypted chats that took time, but not impossibility, to decode. I learned to trace, to dig, to read between the lines. Obsession can turn you into a fast learner. It took me 3 days to find connection. Emails, an account under the name L_Covenant, tied to several transactions, always untraceable, routed through VPNs and proxy servers. But one mistake. A receipt for a dinner reservation in Vienna. The name listed on the invoice was Elias M. Gravori. A name. Finally, I went to the address associated with the payment. It was an upscale apartment in the 7th District, the kind of place that whispered old money. No one answered the door, but I left a note under a false name, requesting a meeting, just enough to stir curiosity. In the meantime, I kept digging into her past. I realized I didn't know her at all. The girl I fell in love with was a mask, a well-practiced performance. There were gaps in her stories. Boarding school in Switzerland, yet no school records. Internship in Paris, but no proof, no photos, no colleagues. I found an old contact in Prague, an ex-roommate, Clara. She was hesitant at first, clearly scared. But when I explained what I'd uncovered, when I said the name Elias, she went quiet. "You're in something bigger than you think," she finally said. "Elias is the handler, not just for her. For many. Handler. The word made my skin crawl. Clara told me about nights when she'd find my girlfriend sneaking out, always with different wig, always with a new identity. She had passports, burner phones, even fake medical degrees. She said it was a job, Clara whispered, but it looked more like a cult. I flew back home the next day with a head full of fire. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was a network, a game, a lie so carefully built. It needed more than anger to destroy. It needed clarity, strategy. I printed everything, emails, receipts, IP logs, voice messages. I organized them like a case file. She had her secrets, but now I had mine, and I wasn't going to stop. Late one night, I got a message. Anonymous number. One sentence. Elias doesn't like loose ends. I stared at the screen, heart racing. They knew. Someone was watching. But I didn't back off. If anything, it fueled me. I reached out to an old friend of mine, Matteo, a cybersecurity analyst. I told him everything. He thought I was insane at first. But when I showed him the files, the web of names, locations, he sat in stunned silence. "This is organized," he said. "There are hierarchies, roles. These people don't just scam. They study their targets. They adapt. It's a system." I asked him to trace the most frequent name beside Elias, Nora L. That's when I learned she wasn't even who she said she was. Not just to me, but to anyone. Nora Lenz, Nora Vasilieva, Nora De Laurentiis. Dozens of versions. And each of them left behind someone like me. Someone broken. One night, I received a package. No sender. Inside was a flash drive. It contained footage. A video of her with Elias. Not romantically. Not sweetly. No, this was business. She sat beside him in a dark room, handing over photos of me, notes, behavioral charts. Elias nodded approvingly, like a project manager checking in on progress. I had been a mark, a case study, a task. The blood froze in my veins. But the fear quickly burned into resolve. She didn't break me. Not completely. Not yet. If Elias was the spider in the center of the web, I was going to tear through the threads. I booked a flight to Geneva, the last known location of an account registered to him. I didn't care about the risk. I had nothing left to lose, only the truth to gain. Because the more I learned, the more I realized this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about exposing them all. I didn't expect a knock on the door. It was late, past midnight. The kind of hour when silence wraps the world like a shroud, and only the haunted are awake. I reached for my phone, ready to call Matteo or, if needed, the police. But something told me to look first. Through the peephole, I saw a familiar shape. Lena. My heart sank. She was one of Nora's oldest friends. At least, that's what I thought. They met years ago, long before I came into the picture. Lena had always been warm, easy to talk to, the kind of person you felt you could trust without needing to know why. But after the fallout, after Nora vanished, Lena had gone silent too. Now she was at my door, shivering, pale, her eyes darting nervously over her shoulder like she was being followed. I opened it. Without a word, she stepped inside. Her hands were trembling. She looked thinner, sleep-deprived, a ghost of the woman I remembered. "I shouldn't be here," she said. "They'll know I talked to you." "Who?" I asked, but deep down I already knew. She didn't sit, didn't ask for water. She paced, fingers twisted together, mouth dry with dread. "You're not crazy," she whispered finally. "Everything you think you've uncovered, it's worse." I felt a jolt in my chest. "Then tell me." She hesitated. "Then, Nora isn't her real name. You already know that. But what you don't know is that this isn't just some scam or a personal vendetta. It's recruitment. That word. Recruitment. For what?" I asked. "For who?" She looked up at me with wide, frightened eyes. "For people like Elias." According to Lena, it started innocently. Years ago, Nora, or the girl she called Nora, invited her to a weekend retreat outside Berlin. A wellness seminar, she said. Talks on psychology, human behavior, communication. But the people there weren't just listening. They were studying each other, manipulating, testing. It was a lab, Lena said, but not for medicine, for control. They were trained to infiltrate lives, to create profiles, to find weaknesses, then exploit them. Relationships, jobs, friendships, it didn't matter. They weren't interested in money at first. They were interested in influence. What's Elias's role in all this? I asked. He runs one of the branches, she said. But there are more. It's international, like a private intelligence ring, except no government claims them. They hire out their agents to the highest bidder. Corporations, politicians, anyone who needs someone manipulated, discredited, or broken quietly. I sat down. My legs suddenly couldn't hold me. "And me?" I said. "What was I?" Lena didn't flinch. "You were a test, a live run, to see if she could fracture someone's identity over time, without them realizing until it was too late." I wanted to scream, to throw something, but I just stared at her. "You knew," I said quietly. "You were her friend. You saw it happening." Tears welled in her eyes. "I tried to warn you once," she said. "Remember that night I called and asked if she told you about Vienna? That was me trying to break the wall. But she found out. She made it clear that if I interfered again, I'd be next." I remember that call. I thought nothing of it at the time, just Lena being curious. But now it was clear. She had been trying to reach me, and I hadn't listened. Lena pulled something from her coat, a small hard drive. "She left this at my place months ago," she said. I was too scared to look. "But maybe you're not." I took it with shaking hands. Before she left, she turned back to me at the door. "They won't stop," she said. "Not just because you know. In fact, that's when they usually tighten the grip." And then she was gone. I stayed up all night with Mateo, decoding the files. What we found chilled us both. Videos, dozens of them, people like me, recorded interactions, voice analyses, emotion charts, each marked with a subject number and psychological profile. Many of the voices I didn't recognize, but some I did. One of them was mine. They'd been listening, studying. There was even a full report titled, Case #34B. Subject displays obsessive-compulsive tendencies, high loyalty index, emotional dependency. Recommend full deconstruction protocol for Phase 3. It wasn't just surveillance. It was a manual. Mateo leaned back, rubbing his face. "This isn't revenge anymore," he said. "This is exposure. We're sitting on proof of human manipulation, targeted emotional warfare. This could bring down companies, governments, even. But we both knew information like this doesn't just go public. It gets erased or silenced. We had to move carefully, share with someone, but not just anyone. Someone who couldn't be bought, who didn't answer to them. But before we could plan the next step, Mateo's expression changed. "What's wrong?" I asked. He pointed at the screen. One of the folders was live. It was updating. Someone was online, watching, and sending a message. A single line appeared. The message was a new text file. "Meet me where the story began." No name, no number, just coordinates, somewhere near Zurich. I didn't recognize the location at first, but when I zoomed in on the satellite image, it hit me like a gut punch. It was the same hillside cafe where I had taken her on our first European trip, where she had cried into her coffee and said she'd never felt so safe. Safe? What a joke. Mateo tried to talk me out of going. This feels like bait, he said. Like they want to see how far you're willing to go. I'm already too far in. I told him. I have to see it through. I took the train from Geneva to Zurich, and then a bus to the small village just outside the city. It was cold and overcast, the kind of day that felt like the sky was holding its breath. The cafe looked the same, old stone walls, red shutters, the scent of baked apples and wet wood. But it was empty now, closed for the season. I waited, and then he appeared. Tall, calm, expensively dressed in a coat, so dark it seemed to swallow light. Elias. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. I told her you'd follow the thread, he said, sitting across from me like we were old friends catching up. You're a curious one, but curiosity is dangerous when you don't understand the rules. I didn't speak. I wanted him to talk. I wanted to see how he moved, how he thought. You think you're uncovering a scandal, he continued, but you're just reading the opening paragraph of a very long book, and you're not the author here. I clenched my fists under the table. Then who is... A faint smile touched his lips. Systems write themselves once people like me build a framework. Nora, she was a page. A good one, granted, but replaceable. He leaned forward. You were never the objective. You were a training ground, a profile. You think you matter because you felt something, but feelings are irrelevant in our line of work. It was like talking to a surgeon about a body he had dissected. What do you want? I asked, my voice hoarse. He studied me. To give you a choice, we tie up loose ends. But sometimes we recruit them. A beat passed. You have the instincts, the drive. Join us, or keep pretending you're the hero and watch how fast your world burns. My pulse roared in my ears. I'd rather burn it down myself. For the first time, his smile faltered. He stood slowly. Then this is your warning. No second meetings. No more chances. He walked away like nothing had happened, like it was just another day. But I had seen his face now, heard his voice, and most importantly, I had recorded every second of it. The pen in my jacket had a built-in mic Mateo had wired. We weren't amateurs anymore. Back in Geneva, Mateo analyzed the recording. We can voice match this. We can trace his cadence, pull voice prints, even track background noise. He slipped. I nodded. We need to find others. Other targets. People like me. We started reaching out through forums, encrypted boards, even support groups for victims of emotional fraud. It was slow. Most ignored us. But then we got a hit. A woman named Celine. London-based. Early 30s. Same pattern. Same lies. Same Nora, but under the name Anya this time. She agreed to meet, cautious but desperate. We flew to London 2 days later. Celine was different. Not broken like I had been, but angry, controlled. She used me, she said I was special, then drained my savings and disappeared. I tried to file a report, but nothing stuck. She was a ghost. I showed her the footage of Elias. She paled. That's the man she called her mentor. Said he helped her when no one else would. We shared files, cross-referenced dates. Elias's name kept coming up, sometimes as a sponsor, sometimes a silent partner in shell companies. He was everywhere and nowhere, like a virus. Mateo built a digital map of every known alias, transaction, and connection. The web was massive. 12 Noras, multiple Eliases, or at least aliases. This wasn't just personal anymore. It was an operation. And still, something felt unfinished. Like I was missing the final piece. Until I got the email. An anonymous account. A video attachment. I played it in silence. It was her, Nora, sitting in a dark room. Alone. Speaking directly to the camera. If you're watching this, it means Elias let you live. Which means you impressed him or scared him. She looked exhausted. Makeup smeared, hands trembling. I wasn't supposed to care. That was the rule. But I did. I still do. A pause. Then a whisper, Don't trust anyone, not even the ones helping you. The video cut to black. I stared at the screen. The message wasn't just a warning. It was a crack, and cracks let light in. London became our base of operations. Celine offered her apartment as a safe house. It wasn't much, but had fiber optic internet, soundproof walls, and no connection to any of our real names. After weeks of moving in the dark, it felt like a headquarters. Mateo worked around the clock, mapping the network of aliases and companies tied to Elias. Celine and I contacted survivors. Some replied with anger, others with gratitude, but most with fear. A few even tried to warn us off. One message stood out. It came from someone calling himself K. I was part of it. Not anymore. They watch. Trust no one who contacts you first. I replied with a burner address. He responded within the hour. K agreed to meet. Said he'd seen what happened to people who dug too deep. We arranged a meeting in Brighton. Public, daylight, cameras everywhere. He arrived late. Tall, lanky, nervous. Every few steps, he glanced over his shoulder. I shouldn't be here, he muttered, barely shaking my hand. But you need to know, this isn't just scams and lies. It's recruitment. Grooming. They choose people like her for a reason. I frowned. Like who? Actors. Linguists. Trauma survivors. People who know how to pretend and how to read others. Elias doesn't control them like soldiers. He builds them like tools. Why? Kay glanced around. Because some clients don't want money. They want control. Blackmail. Leverage. The people you thought were victims? Some of them are part of it. My stomach turned. You mean? He cut me off. I mean you're playing a game with no rules. And the ones who made the board are already 10 steps ahead. Before I could ask more, Kay stood up. If I stay longer, they'll know. He left without saying goodbye. Back in London, things started going wrong. Our encrypted chats were suddenly buggy. Mateo's laptop bricked without warning. A man started showing up outside Celine's building. Always on his phone. Always pretending to wait for someone who never came. We were being watched. One night, I returned from a grocery run to find Celine standing motionless by the window, phone in hand. She called, she said. Nora. No voice, just breathing. And then a recording of me from years ago. She played it. It was her, crying, saying things she swore no one had ever heard. Words recorded in the dark. Mateo turned pale. They're inside the network. Ours. We switched systems. Scrubbed everything. Paranoia became oxygen. Then came the breakthrough. A lead in Brussels. A former handler gone rogue named Albrecht. He had surfaced in a deep web forum, offering information in exchange for insurance. We bought time, paid through crypto layers. He sent us a file. It was a roster, code names, targets, handlers, and on page 4, Nora, Project Helix. Assigned handler, Yem Gravori. Under her notes, subject shows emotional leakage. Attachment risks. Monitor closely. Potential liability. Liability. They had been watching her. 2. The next night, I woke to noise, glass shattering downstairs. We weren't alone. Mateo reached for the emergency hard drives while I grabbed the folder of documents. Celine opened the back window. We'd planned the exit in case of something like this. But they didn't come upstairs. No voices. No footsteps. Just silence. We waited in the alley for 30 minutes before returning. Nothing was stolen, but everything was touched. A message was left on the wall, scrawled in lipstick across the mirror. You should have taken the offer. We moved the next day, burned all devices, started over. But something inside me had changed. I no longer wanted just truth. I wanted to end them. And to do that, I had to find the original node, the seed. The file from Albrecht listed a location, not a city, not an office, a name, Taraxa. I looked it up. No company registration, no public record, but buried in an old auction record from 2012, one mention, Taraxa Foundation. Location, Northern Italy. Disbanded. Closed, or so they said. Mateo traced a ghost address. A villa near Lake Como. Celine hesitated. It could be a trap. I looked at her. I hope it is. The road to Lake Como twisted through the mountains like a serpent guarding secrets. Thick fog clung to the trees, and the silence felt artificial, like nature itself was holding its breath. Mateo sat beside me, checking the drone controls. Celine was in the back seat, eyes scanning every car that passed. No one spoke. Taraxa wasn't on any GPS. The only directions came from a decades-old parcel record we found buried in a government archive. Whoever lived there now didn't want to be found. The villa appeared suddenly, tall, pale stone, half swallowed by ivy, surrounded by a wrought iron fence that time had tried to reclaim. No visible cameras. No guards. But we knew better. We parked a mile away and approached on foot. The air was colder here, heavy with the scent of damp leaves and secrets. Celine whispered, "Are we really doing this?" I didn't answer. I just nodded. We slipped through a gap in the fence, crept along the sidewall. Mateo launched the drone, eyes flicking across the live feed. 2 heat signatures inside, he muttered. Ground floor, 1 sitting, 1 pacing. We circled to the back. An old service door. Locked, of course, but Mateo handled it. The click of the latch sounded like thunder in the silence. Inside, the villa smelled of old paper and dust. Every step echoed. The walls were lined with shelves not of books, but of files. Cabinets. Film reels. Archives. Celine stopped at a metal cabinet. Her fingers trembled as she pulled it open. Inside, folders. Dozens. All labeled with names. Real names. Fake ones. Code names. Mine. Hers. Dozens of others. Project Helix. Project Arate. Project Virgil. It wasn't a scam. It was a program. Governmental? Corporate? Something in between? It didn't matter. We were products. Test cases. Psychological models for control, manipulation, loyalty breakdown. Look at this. Mateo pointed to a chart. Columns of subjects' outcomes, behavioral notes. Beside Nora's file, 2 words chill me to the bone. Deviation noted. She wasn't supposed to fall in love. She wasn't supposed to waver. But she did. She broke their protocol. Maybe that's why they marked her. Footsteps. We froze. A figure entered the room. Mid-50s, thin, composed. Gray suit. He looked at us without surprise. "Welcome," he said. "You've come far. I assume you want answers." I stepped forward. "Elias." He gave a small smile. "No, but you're not the first to ask that. What is this place?" Celine demanded. "A mirror," he replied, "for people who believe they know themselves until we show them otherwise." Mateo clenched his fists. "You ruin lives. We reveal them. You weren't chosen at random. She didn't find you. You were selected because you matched a pattern. Do you know what the first note in your file was?" I stayed silent. He walked to a cabinet. Open a folder. Read aloud. High-functioning depressive. Emotionally isolated. Ideal subject for dependence-forming narrative. Strong guilt receptors. My vision blurred. Celine gasped. He looked up. "You think she tricked you?" But she was following a script. Until she wasn't. Suddenly, alarms. Red lights began flashing. The man frowned, tapping an earpiece. Security breach. I didn't wait. I lunged at him, grabbing the folder. Mateo pulled Celine back. We ran. Down the hall. Past rooms filled with monitors, biometric stations, voice logs. The truth was everywhere, spilling from every drawer, every server. We reached the exit just as 2 black-clad guards burst in. Mateo turned through a flash device. "White light!" Screams. We ran into the forest, hearts pounding, lungs on fire. I clutched the folder like it was oxygen. We didn't stop until we reached the car. Only then did I open the file again. Inside was a photograph. Not of me. Of Nora, standing outside a hospital. Dated 6 months ago. The caption read, "Subject re-entered under alternate directive." She wasn't gone. She wasn't hiding. She was back in the game. Or sent after me. I looked up at Mateo, at Celine, at the road behind us. Nothing would ever be the same. But one thing was now clear. The only way to end this was to find her first